Hello and welcome back to our wee food studio here in Fife on the coastal path. And today it's been pretty dreich, so I hope this is well enough lit for you today because we've got every light blazing. And we're going to be a little bit wild tonight and use some of the autumn harvest, the berries that are fruitful around about Fife for free just now. So we've got two dishes, a soup and pudding that I hope you'll enjoy and try yourselves at home. So we're going to start off by making a basic Swiss roll, a roulade if you want. And here we've got 3 eggs and 75 grams of sugar. I've used brown sugar because I like using brown sugar. It gives a little bit of a caramel taste to it. And you want to whip it, which I've done noisily before we began, till it's very, very thick and creamy. Can you see that you can see the trail on that? It's very, very thick. And that's what you need. That's important to incorporate lots and lots of air. That's really important. And don't then bang your beaters on the side of the bowl because that knocks out air. Whatever you do, you don't want to knock out air. And I've got a tin here, a Swiss roll tin, and a piece of baking parchment to line it. And all I have left to do for this stage is to add the flour, and I've preheated the oven. And this only takes about 8 minutes. So it's a lovely, lovely, quick sponge for any time of the day and a great dessert. So I'm going to sprinkle in 75 grams of flour. So that's 3 eggs, 75 of sugar, 75 of flour. And if you're in old money, that's 333. 3 ounces of flour, 3 ounces of sugar, 3 eggs. So by sprinkling it, it means again, I'm not knocking out any air, which is the whole thing here is to try not to knock out air. And then we fold it in with a large metal spoon or a spatula so that you bring it round and you don't knock out that air. Nice and gently. Going round the outside and cutting through the middle. But don't beat it, don't whip it. Just do it for the minimum time until you can see there's no more flour that you need to incorporate. And that happens quite quickly. But you just have to make sure there isn't a little puddle of flour lying at the bottom. As you can see there, you can sometimes see that when you flip it over, there's a little bit of flour. So you just want to make sure that there is none of that free flour and that it's been incorporated into our lovely foam. And when this goes in the oven for such a short time, the heat expands the bubbles, the gluten sets, and you have got a beautiful light sponge. Now this is what's called a fatless sponge because there's no butter in it. So you can, it's a different style of sponge that cooks more quickly, but it also doesn't keep as well. The butter is a preservative and keeps your cake longer. But this cake doesn't keep anyway. You eat it. You eat it first. So we'll pop it in here and in it goes. It will find its own level, so you don't have to worry too much about spreading it out to the edges. So we'll just get the last bit out of the bowl here. That's where this spatula is so handy because you don't miss any of the cake mixture at all. Empty bowl. And you can just smooth it a little bit towards the edges, but you don't have to worry too much because the oven will do the rest. Make sure there's none left on the spatula. I don't encourage the children to lick this one because it's got raw egg yolk, well, raw eggs. So better to just lick the butter icing and not a cake mix. And in it goes, and we'll keep an eye on the time, and it'll be ready when it's well risen, set, and a little bit shrunk round the edges. So I'll keep an eye on it and let you know. Now the other dish we have here is something that you will have all seen ever since you were a child, rose hips. But have you ever eaten them? Maybe some of you, depending on your age, will have had rosehip syrup from the chemist as a wee child, given to us in the winter, particularly because it was rich in vitamin C. But it's also very, very sugary. So this dish is not as sugary at all, and it makes an absolutely delicious winter dish that's almost free. So we take these, and you'll see there's some of them are quite chubby, and some of them are real thin torpedo ones. And they're all good. Any rose hip will do. But I steer away from the really, really hairy ones because I feel that I'm giving myself more problems that I might get some hairs in the soup. And I don't make the whole soup with these big fat ones like cherry tomatoes, because I think they have less flavour. They're good for bulking up your soup, but I think they have less flavour. So the little guys are great for the flavour. So I use a mix. And what I've done in here is I've topped and tailed them just with a pair of kitchen scissors. So just sit down in front of the telly or the radio or whatever you want to do and just snip, 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 snip till you've got the tops and the tails off every one of them. And then I've given them a little rinse in water, and they're going to go in a pan on the cooker, and they will take about an hour to cook. So in they go, and they'll get covered with water, put on to simmer with 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, and this will make enough for 3 to 4 people. So we'll come get that on the cooker, and we'll be back in a minute to see that sponge. And our cake has had 8 to 10 minutes, so it's ready, it's well risen, it's set. Here it is, and what you have to do is pop it down onto another piece of paper, like so. And this is very hot, so take care of that one. And then you want to rip off the paper, and if you rip it off in ribbons, then you won't tear the cake. So it's quite delicate, so if you try and rip it off like you would a sticking plaster, then you will tear your cake, and you don't want to do that. So just take it off a little bit carefully, and if you do it in ribbons, it's usually fine. And if it's not, the cream will glue it together again, so it's not the end of the world. Just take care on the end one there. There we are. Perfect. Okay. Now, I've put it on a cutting board because to roll it up, you want to cut the crusts off on the ends. Otherwise, it'll stop them from rolling up. And if you do that straight onto your surface, you might scratch it. So you don't want to do that either. And then give it a little half cut just to start the rolling process. Now, the next bit's a little bit weird. We're going to put in a piece of paper, and we have to do this quite quickly whilst it's still very, very hot. And we're going to use the paper underneath to roll it up like so. And there we have a Swiss roll filled with paper. Now, why have I done that? If you're going to use the Swiss roll with just jam and leave it like that, you can spread it when the cake is hot, roll it up, guzzle it immediately, or keep it until it's cool. But if you're going to fill it with whipped cream, then it has to be cold. Otherwise, the whipped cream just melts out. So you need to roll up the sponge while it's hot so that it has a memory of being rolled. Otherwise, it'll set flat. So we roll it up with paper inside, and when it's cold, in about half an hour, then we can unroll it and fill it with whipped cream and our other ingredient today, which is wild blueberry jam that I've made this season with some blueberries we picked. So it's a really intense, wonderful purple jam, and that's what we're going to use today. So that's our little bit of wild in our pudding, and we've got our rosehip soup. So foraging is the name of the game this week. This is going to cool, and on the cooker, we have got these bubbling away, and they'll need a little bit longer. So they're just going to do their stuff in the pan there. And they'll be about an hour until they're nice and tender. These cookers are more intelligent than me. They go off when I lift the pan. So we'll be back when the cake is cooled. Now our cake is cold, and I've whipped up some cream, and you can see it's just a lovely, soft, floppy consistency that will spread beautifully. Now you can, of course, use an electric beater, but just take care when you do that you don't end up with a sort of buttery bit in the middle, whereas you've actually got more control over the whipping with a balloon whisk. So I'm going to unwrap my cake, That I can recycle. That would be good for doing another cake another day, so don't bin it. And in our mix here, we're going to put blueberry jam. Now, the recipe for the blueberry jam is in our book, and there's also quite a lot of recipes on the website, scottishfoodguide.scot. There's a recipe section, as well as places to eat and wonderful producers. And of course, some of the producers make jams. So if you're not a jam maker yourself, why not try Craigie's? Just on the outskirts of Edinburgh, they do the most fantastic homemade jams. So I'm being quite generous. Go right up to the corners so you don't have any poor soul that gets a bold bit. Like so. Spread it right up to the edges. And then on goes our cream. Now remember, it's got to be a cold sponge before you do this, but it does cool down very quickly. Now you can get this made ahead of time. You can leave it out, not in a sunny place, not in direct sunlight, or your cream will turn. But you can leave it in a cool place in the house for up to 4 hours. But if you're going to have it the next day, you really have to put it in the fridge because there's dairy produce here. So you wouldn't want to leave it out for any longer than that. But if you're going to be eating it that day, then it's better to put it in a cool place, maybe in the spare room or something, rather than the fridge, because the flavour does get affected a little bit when you put it in the fridge. It kind of dulls the flavour a little bit. But then the following day, if you've got any leftovers and it's been in the fridge, bring it out, bring it up to room temperature before you enjoy eating it. Now just roughly spread out your cream over that amazing blueberry jam, like so. And then use the other paper to help you roll it up. Remember you had a line cut, so it'll fall onto that line nicely to start it off. And then just roll it up. And try and have the seam on the bottom. Then give it a little cuddle, like so. Lift away the paper. And you've got a lovely, lovely cake. And I'm going to pop it on this nice plate. And I'm going to cut it in the middle because I know it won't quite fit the cake. So I'll just slice it through. And you can see that lovely Swiss roll there. Absolutely delicious. That would make a very, very luxury trifle filling as well. Now I'm a bit sticky, so I'm just going to give my hands a wee wash here. Just to finish it off. So to finish this off, what we're going to do is give it a light dusting of icing sugar. Just to dress it up a little bit, which is rather pretty, like so. There we are. And one last little final touch, which is just extra special. If your cake is for someone extra special. There's a Scottish food member called It's Just Fruit, and she does dried fruit and dried vegetables, and they're so beautiful. So here we have it with a little bit of icing sugar just to give it a finishing touch there. And for that extra special person that this cake's for, we have one last ingredient, which you may not have seen before. It's a lovely lady we have on Scottish Food Guide in the Borders who makes just fruit and veg. And she dries the fruit and the vegetables into little powders. And they're so intense, they're pure powders. So I have the garlic one, I have dried tomatoes, and this one is blackcurrant. So she does sweet ones and she does savoury ones. And this is just the perfect topping to finish off this cake. So I've got a little teaspoon. No, I haven't got a little teaspoon. So I'll just use the end of this spoon here. And I'm going to tap it onto the top of the cake. And it will just look absolutely gorgeous. And it has a really intense flavour. It's incredible. Really lovely. So just finish us off the cake. So dessert ready, soup will be next. It's nearly there. We have to give it that full hour for the rose hips to soften. So back in a minute. And now to finish the soup. So it's been bubbling away, and then I use a spoon to just press the rose hips against the side of the pan, just to help break them up to make sure they're really soft. And you should be able to see them there. Just there you are. So some are already in the sieve here, and I'm going to add a little bit more, but not all of it because I'm working it through bit by bit. And I've got the bowl, and I've got it in a sieve here, just an ordinary kitchen sieve. And I'm just going to work this to make sure that we get it through the sieve. So what goes through is a lovely puree. Now, gradually it comes up the sides, of course, and then it is in the sieve. So we don't want that. So we want another clean bowl handy so that we can decant the soup we already have here. You see, into the bowl. And then we've got a nice empty bowl again to continue the process. So nudge it around with a wooden spoon, working it, and you'll get very, very little left in the sieve. Just keep working it, and it doesn't take very long. It takes about 5-10 minutes at the very most to get it all through. And at the very end, you'll have a little bit that you just tap into your compost and you're done. And we're going to have a lovely, smooth rosehip soup. And as simple as that, we have a wonderful bowl full of beautiful, vibrant red rosehip soup. It's very easy and very delicious. Now, at this stage, you have a couple of jobs to do. One is to have a little taste and see what you think. Oh, that's lovely. Really lovely. Now, it started out with half a bowl of rose hips, just ordinary rose hips from the wild roses around the place, all over Fife. Boiled for an hour with water, sufficient water to really have them moving around, and a tablespoon of brown sugar. Now, we're not trying to serve a sweet soup. It's got a lovely umami, but what we are doing is taking away any bitterness. So you might need to add a tiny bit more brown sugar, but start with one because you can't take it away and you don't want sweet soup. Start with one, add a little bit more if you need it. You're just wanting to balance out any bitterness because sometimes a few of the rose hips can be a little bitter, and that's all you're doing is balancing that out. And it's really delicious. Now, if you would like to thicken it, you add a tablespoon of corn flour slaked in water, bring it to the boil, and then you've got a thicker soup, and this beautiful soup is ready to go. Now, in Sweden, you can have this as a lovely piping hot soup on an autumn day, but they also serve it chilled in a jug in a breakfast buffet, and you can have it like a shot, like a chilled shot of vitamins in the morning. And there is our lovely, lovely rosehip soup. Now, at the moment, it's actually still vegan, it so happens, but by the time we've finished with it, we'll have a swirl and cream on top as well. So that's today's two dishes. Do get out there and foraging this autumn. Some things are very easy and very obvious. Brambles, rose hips, very, very easy. Elderberries are pretty easy too, but remember you have to cook the elderberries before eating them. So elderberry jelly is a lovely way of doing that. Some things like mushrooms, you should be really, really careful and go with somebody who knows what they're doing, because it can be tricky, it can be dangerous if you eat the wrong thing. And when it comes to the brambles, I always go for the ones that are higher up and as rural as I can find, because I don't want brambles and dogs don't mix. I don't want anything additional on my brambles other than pure nature and rainwater, that's all. So do think about that when you're foraging as to where you're picking them, where dogs and other animals have been, just where have you picking them. And of course, in the case of the rose hips, they're up high. and they're also getting boiled and boiled and boiled, so they couldn't be more safe. So with that little lecture, let me remind you of our book, available on the website. Do check out the website when you're looking for somewhere to eat, scottishfoodguide.scot. All the places are supporting Scottish produce and Scottish farmers, and that's what you should be doing too. So happy eating, happy cooking. See you next time.